The night was cold and quiet on the edge of the Earth colony. Thomas, a middle-aged human man, lived alone in a small wooden farmhouse. It was almost midnight, and the wind outside howled like a wild animal. Thomas sat near the fire reading an old book when he heard a noise. Clink. A soft sound like a spoon falling on the kitchen floor. He stood up slowly, heart beating faster. He wasn't expecting visitors, and thieves were rare in this peaceful area. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped toward the kitchen. The light from the hallway barely touched the doorframe. The kitchen was silent now. Too silent, but something didn't feel right. Thomas opened the door gently and flicked on the light. And there, standing near the counter, was an alien woman. She froze like a deer in headlights, her arms trembling. She was thin, too thin, and her clothes looked dirty and torn. She wasn't holding anything, not even a weapon. Her large eyes locked onto the loaf of bread on the counter. Thomas didn't move. He looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't dangerous. She was hungry, scared and alone. He raised his hand slowly, palm up. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said calmly. The alien woman didn't speak. She just looked from his face to the bread, then back to his face again. Her hands shook as she took one step back. Thomas saw it clearly now. Her skin was pale, blue. Her hair hung in tangled strands, and strange, deep scars marked her arms. Her eyes were wide and glossy, filled with hunger and pain. He took a breath and then walked over to the counter. He picked up the bread, broke it in half, and placed it on the table. He stepped back and pointed. "You can eat it," he said softly. The alien woman didn't move for 5 long seconds. Then suddenly she rushed forward. She grabbed the bread and began eating like she hadn't seen food in days. Tears ran down her cheeks as crumbs fell from her mouth. She made no sound, only soft gasps between bites. Thomas's heart sank. Who was she? Where had she come from? He watched her finish the bread in seconds. Then she looked up at him, her lips shaking. Thank you," she whispered, her voice dry and broken. It was the first time she spoke. Her accent was strange, but her meaning was clear. Thomas nodded and stepped to the cabinet. He pulled out a bottle of clean water and placed it on the table. She hesitated, then grabbed it and drank deeply. "Are you hurt?" he asked slowly. She shook her head, but Thomas could tell it was a lie. She clutched her side as if something pained her. "What's your name?" he asked again. The woman looked away, unsure if she should answer. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, "Zuriah." Thomas gave her a small smile. "I'm Thomas. You're safe here for now." Zuriah looked confused, almost like she didn't believe him. Thomas turned to leave the kitchen, but then stopped. He pulled out a thick blanket from the drawer and offered it to her. Zuriah didn't take it at first, but then she slowly reached out. Her fingers touched his hand for a moment, cold and shaking. Then she pulled the blanket close to her chest. He pointed to the small storage shed outside. "You can sleep in there tonight. It's not warm, but it's dry and quiet." Zuriah's eyes widened. A shed was still better than the cold streets. She nodded silently. Thomas led her to the door and stepped outside into the chilly night. He opened the shed and cleared a small space for her. He set an old pillow and the blanket inside. "There. It's not much, but it's yours for the night," he said. Zuriah stood silently at the entrance. She looked back at him, confused, thankful, afraid, and then she stepped inside. Thomas closed the door gently behind her. He walked back to the house, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept asking, who was Zuriah? What had happened to her? And why did her eyes look like she had lost everything? Thing was certain, this was no ordinary break-in. This was the beginning of something far more important. And Thomas had just let it through his door. Morning came slow and gray. A light drizzle tapped gently on the windows of Thomas's farmhouse. Inside, he sipped his coffee and stared at the shed through the glass. It had been hours since he let the alien woman, Zuriah, sleep there. He didn't know if she was still inside or if she had disappeared like a shadow. He stepped outside, boots crunching the wet dirt. The door to the shed was still shut, but no sound came from within. He Tap gently, Zariah. No answer. He opened the door slowly, half expecting an empty space, but she was there, curled in the corner, the blanket wrapped tightly around her. Her face was pale and her breathing was shallow. She opened one eye as the door creaked. For a moment she looked ready to run, but when she saw Thomas's calm face, her body relaxed slightly. "I brought food," he said, holding out a plate of eggs and bread. He placed it near her without stepping further in. Then he backed away and waited outside. A minute later, he heard chewing. She was still hungry, desperately so. He walked back to the porch, grabbed an old first aid kit. Something told him she wasn't just tired, she was wounded. When he returned, she had finished eating and was now holding her side again. "May I take a look?" he asked, kneeling down at the door. Zariah looked at him carefully, then gave a small nod. She slowly unwrapped part of the cloth covering her side. Thomas's eyes narrowed. There was a deep, crusted wound, burned at the edge. Maybe a plasma weapon? He didn't ask how she got it, he just cleaned it, applied ointment, and wrapped it gently with gauze. Zariah flinched, but never made a sound. "You should have gotten help days ago," he murmured. "I would have been killed." "She," whispered. Thomas looked at her. "By who?" She hesitated, looking at the ground, then said in a broken voice, "My own people." Thomas sat down on a nearby crate, trying to understand. Zariah pulled the blanket back around herself and leaned against the wall. "I was marked useless after my husband died," she said slowly. "There's no place for a widow with no child in my clan." She looked at her hands, voice shaking. "I escaped before they threw me away." The rain outside grew heavier. Thomas didn't speak. He had heard of harsh alien cultures, but never imagined something like this. Zariah looked up, her large eyes filled with something beyond sadness. "Food is not just food to me," she said softly. "That bread last night, it was life." Thomas stood quietly for a moment, then nodded. "You can stay here until you're strong again." Zariah blinked, unsure if she heard him right. "Why?" she asked. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he replied. "You're hurt, hungry, and not a threat." For a long time neither of them spoke. Then she whispered, "Thank you, Thomas." Over the next few days the rhythm between them grew. Thomas brought her food, water, and checked her wound daily. Zariah slowly began to sit outside the shed, feeling sunlight for the first time in weeks. One morning, he found her standing near the vegetable patch. She watched the sprouts with wonder in her eyes. "You grow these yourself?" she asked. Thomas smiled. "Yep, just me and dirt and time." She crouched down and touched a tiny green leaf. "In my world, only the rich see living plants." Thomas was quiet, realizing how different their lives were, but the way she smiled at the plant, it was like she'd touched hope. Later that afternoon, Thomas gave her a simple task: gather eggs from the coop. She returned with 5 in her hands, proud and laughing slightly. "That chicken tried to peck me," she said. Thomas chuckled. "They all do, even to me." That evening, as the sun painted the sky orange and gold, Zariah sat near the fence and looked out across the field. Her body was healing, and so was something deeper inside. But then, her smile faded. She stood up quickly and walked toward Thomas, eyes full of worry. "They'll come," she said quietly. "My people, the enforcers, they might track my signal." Thomas frowned. "When?" "I don't know. Maybe soon," she said, voice low. "If they find me here, they'll kill me, and maybe you too." He looked at her for a long time, then said something she didn't expect. "Let them come," he said calmly. "You won't face them alone." Zariah's lips parted slightly in shock. For the first time in years, someone wasn't running from her. They were standing with her. The night came fast that day. The stars above the Earth colony shined like quiet watchers, but something about the wind felt different, faster, colder. Thomas stood on his porch staring at the sky. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew something was coming. Inside the shed, Zuriah sat on the wooden floor. She was stronger now, her skin no longer pale, her eyes more alert. But she didn't sleep. She sat with her arms wrapped around her knees, listening, remembering her people didn't always treat widows like trash. But after the war destroyed half their world, traditions changed. To survive, only the useful were allowed to remain. Widows without children were seen as a burden. Zuriah's husband died saving a general. But that didn't matter to the council, she was told. Your name will be erased. She was dragged to a cleansing facility and locked with others. Most didn't survive the first week. Zuriah escaped. When the guards were distracted by a fire, she ran for 3 days, bleeding, crawling, until she reached a human district. That's when she found Thomas's kitchen. Now, days later, she felt the danger creeping close again. She stepped outside the shed and found Thomas fixing a fence. They're close, she whispered. Thomas turned. You sure? She nodded. I can feel it. My people use scanners, and they never stop hunting. Thomas thought for a moment, then tossed the hammer aside. I'll get the field drone working. It has an early warning system. Zuriah followed him, surprised at how calm he was. Why are you helping me? She asked. If they find you, they'll arrest you. Or worse, Thomas shrugged. You helped yourself first. You didn't hurt anyone. You just needed help. He looked at her. That's enough for me. Zuriah lowered her head. No one had ever said those words to her before, not even her husband. That night, as they ate together in the shed, the drone buzzed. Once, then beeped loudly. Thomas jumped to his feet. It picked something up. Zuriah's eyes widened. They're here. He grabbed a pair of binoculars and ran to the porch. In the far distance, 3 figures moved through the crop fields, slow and sharp, not human, tall, armored, and glowing faintly blue under the moonlight. Zuriah's heart pounded in her chest. She backed into the shed, panicking. They'll kill me if they see me. They won't talk. They'll just... Hey, Thomas said, grabbing her shoulders. Breathe, Zuriah. I'm here. She stared at him with shaking eyes. I should leave. If they catch me near you, they'll punish you too. No, he said. If you run, they'll hunt you like an animal. He looked around, thinking fast. We need a place they won't check. He led her into the storage cellar. Hidden, beneath a floorboard, dark, cold, and lined with old jars of pickled vegetables and supplies. Stay quiet. No matter what, he said. I'll deal with them. Zuriah grabbed his hand before he left. Don't die for me, Thomas, she said softly. He smiled, not planning to. Minutes later, the enforcers reached the porch. One of them spoke, in sharp, clicking words, but Thomas calmly replied, This is my farm. You're on Earth territory. The leader stepped forward, helmet reflecting the porch light. We are looking for an escaped female of the Vorquin species, he said. Coldly, she is dangerous, a threat to order. Thomas crossed his arms. Haven't seen anyone like that, he lied. I live alone. The enforcers scanned the area with glowing devices. They searched the shed, the coops, even the water barrels. But when they approached the cellar, Thomas stepped between them. That's my food storage. Earth law says you need a warrant to enter it. The leader glared at him. If she is found here, you will be arrested. Thomas didn't blink. Then you better come back with paperwork. There was a long silence. Then the lead enforcer turned away. We'll return, he said darkly. The 3 vanished into the fields as fast as they came. Thomas waited until the drone said they were gone. Then he rushed to the cellar and opened it. Zuriah was there, curled up, quiet, and unharmed. He helped her out, and she looked at him with wide, amazed eyes. You lied for me, she whispered. I protected you, he corrected. I don't deserve this, she said. Not after all I've done. All I've lost, he wiped dust off her shoulder. Everyone deserves a second chance, he said gently. Zuriah looked up at him, eyes filling with tears, for the first time in years. She felt safe, but deep inside, she knew this wasn't over. The enforcers would return, and next time, they might not leave so easily. The morning sun rose through a cloudy sky, but on Thomas's farm, everything felt calm, at least on the surface. Birds sang softly. The soil smelled rich after a night of rain, but the memory of the enforcers still hung in the air like smoke. Zariah stood by the fence, her arms crossed tightly around her. She watched the fields swaying gently in the wind. Her thoughts were heavy, but her eyes were clear. She wasn't the same weak woman who had stolen bread in the night. She was healing, slowly but surely. Thomas walked over with a basket full of seeds. He handed it to her with a smile. "You said you wanted to help." Zariah blinked, surprised. "You trust me with this?" "They're just seeds," he shrugged, "but if you plant them right, they become life." Something about that line struck her deeply. She took the basket and knelt down in the soft dirt. For the first time in years, her hands touched the ground, not to hide or crawl, but to build. They worked side by side. Thomas taught her how to plant rows, water them just enough. Zariah asked questions curious about earth crops, how they grow, how they taste. She smiled when she learned tomatoes grow in little green balls first. She laughed softly when a curious chicken tried to peck her hand again. Thomas watched her with quiet pride. Her skin had more color now. Her eyes sparkled when she smiled. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming part of something. Something peaceful, something good. Later that evening, they sat under the porch roof. Rain fell lightly again, but it was warm. Zariah sipped tea from a ceramic cup, holding it carefully. "This world is strange," she said softly. "You protect the weak, even strangers." Thomas leaned back in his chair. "Not everyone does, but I try." Zariah looked at him, her voice low. "You didn't have to protect me, but you did." "I saw a soul worth saving," he replied, not looking at her. Zariah went silent. Those words, "a soul worth saving," wrapped around her heart like a blanket. Then she said something she hadn't told anyone before. "I had a child once," she whispered, "before the war." Thomas turned to her slowly. "He died when the enemy bombed our village. My husband died a month later." She held the cup tighter. "After that, they said I had no purpose left." Thomas didn't interrupt. He let her speak. "They marked me useless. I begged to work, to serve, even clean ships." Tears slid down her cheeks, but her voice remained steady. "They put me in the disposal sector anyway." Thomas reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "You are not useless," he said firmly. "You are strong. You're learning. You're healing. That's more than most people can do after what you've lived through." Zariah stared at their joined hands. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her palm upward and gently gripped his fingers. Her hand was still cold, but her eyes held warmth. In the days that followed, Zariah became part of the farm. She woke early, helped with the animals, watered crops, and even learned how to cook. Her favorite thing was making bread, soft, warm bread, the same kind she had once stolen, now made with her own hands. The townspeople began to notice her. At first they whispered, some with fear, some with suspicion. But then they saw her, sweeping the porch, feeding the chickens and smiling at children, and slowly, very slowly, their fear turned into quiet respect. One afternoon, a little girl from town dropped her doll outside the fence. Zariah picked it up and handed it back, smiling. The girl didn't run away. Instead, she hugged Zariah's leg and said, "You smell like cookies." Zariah laughed. For the first time in years, her laugh didn't sound hollow. That night, Thomas found her staring at the stars. He stepped beside her and asked, "What are you thinking about?" Zariah's voice was calm. "That maybe I'm not meant to die alone." Thomas looked at her, his heart quiet but steady. "You never were," he said. She turned toward him, her eyes shining, not with fear, but with something new. "I want to live," she said. "Not just hide, not just run. I want to stay." Thomas nodded. "Then stay. This is your home now." Zariah's lips trembled and she whispered something so soft it nearly vanished in the wind. "My name, Zariah." It means seed of hope in my language. Thomas smiled gently. Then you were planted in the right place. But even as laughter returned to the farmhouse, dark clouds were still building beyond the stars. The enforcers hadn't forgotten her, and Zariah's peace was about to be tested in ways she never expected. It was just before sunrise when the silence broke. A strange hum echoed over the fields like thunder underwater. Thomas sat up in bed, alert. That sound wasn't wind or storm. It was alien engines. Zariah was already awake, sitting near the window in the shed. She heard it too. Her hands gripped the edge of the bed tightly. They found me, she whispered to herself. They're here. The sky above turned dark, not with clouds, but with the shadow of a ship. A small black vessel hovered just above the field, lights blinking along its edges. 3 figures dropped from it, armored, tall, and precise. Enforcers. Thomas met them. At the edge of his field, he didn't carry a weapon, just a hard stare and calm steps. One of the enforcers stepped forward, helmet smooth and silver. You have been warned, the voice buzzed from the helmet's speaker. There is no law protecting her now. Return the fugitive. I told you, Thomas said. She hasn't harmed anyone, she's just surviving. She broke our laws, the enforcer replied coldly. She was declared disposable. Harboring her is a violation of interspecies agreements. Thomas stood his ground. This is Earth. On this land, humans decide who deserves help. Zariah stepped out from behind the barn. Her eyes met Thomas's for only a second. He gave her the tiniest nod. Then she stepped forward and faced the enforcers herself. I won't run, she said clearly, voice steady. But I will speak before you drag me away. The lead enforcer tilted his head, surprised she spoke at all. You have no rights to defend yourself. I have dignity, Zariah replied. That's more than you left me with. She turned to Thomas, her voice softer. I don't want you hurt. I'll go. Just don't fight them. Thomas shook his head. You're not going anywhere. He walked up beside her and faced the enforcers again. If you take her, you'll be breaking Earth law. She's under my protection. One of the soldiers raised a scanner. She is not your responsibility. She's not your kind. Thomas didn't blink. Doesn't matter. She's still mine to protect. The enforcer stepped closer. By what right do you claim her? Thomas inhaled slowly, then said one word. Marriage. Silence. Even Zariah's breath caught in her throat. What? She whispered, stunned. Thomas didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the enforcer. She is my partner, my wife, under Earth's refugee law and intercultural sanctuary rights. The enforcer's visor flickered with data for several seconds. Then the voice returned, sharper now. You're using a loophole to keep a fugitive. I'm using a law you signed in the Galactic Treaty, Thomas replied. You don't want to start a political fire on Earth soil, not over one widow. Zariah stared at him, her heart pounding like war drums. She didn't know what shocked her more, that he said it, or that he meant it. The enforcers stepped back, clearly, annoyed but silent. We will report this to the High Council, the leader said. We will return with an appeal. You do that, Thomas replied. She'll still be here, and so will I. The enforcers turned and vanished into the mist. Their ship lifted without a sound and disappeared into the clouds. Zariah didn't speak for a long moment. She just stared at Thomas, confused, overwhelmed, and speechless. Finally, she found her voice. Why did you do that? Thomas looked at her, calm but honest. Because they only understand rules, so I gave them one to follow. Zariah's lips parted, her hands trembled slightly. But marriage? That word means more than protection on my world. He stepped closer. I won't ask you to pretend, but I'll stand by what I said. Zariah blinked quickly, then whispered. You claimed me in front of them, even though it might put you in danger. I've seen enough people turn away from others just because it's easier, he said. I don't want to be one of them. Tears slipped down her cheeks, quiet, soft, but full of emotion. She had been tossed away, hunted, forgotten by her own people. And now, someone claimed her, not for her status, not for her body, but because she mattered. Thomas gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to stay here because of this," he said, "but if you want to, this can be your home." Soraya looked up, her voice shaky. "I don't want to leave," she whispered. "I never did." And for the first time in her life, the word wife didn't feel like a cage. It felt like shelter. The next morning, the air was strangely still. No wind, no sound. Only the soft rustling of crops in the field. But inside the farmhouse, something had changed. Soraya stood in the kitchen, holding the same kind of bread she once stole. Now she was baking it, her hands moving confidently. The smell filled the room like a memory of peace. Thomas leaned on the doorframe, watching her quietly. He hadn't spoken much since the enforcers left the day before, not because he regretted what he'd said. He didn't, but because he knew his words had changed everything. Soraya broke the silence. "On my planet, marriage is sacred." Thomas nodded. "Same here, for most people." She turned to face him. "A claim like that can't be undone easily in my culture." "I know," he replied gently. "I didn't say it to trick them." Soraya looked down, brushing flour from her hands. "I just never thought someone would choose me again. Not like that." Thomas stepped forward, standing across the table from her. "I didn't say it for their benefit," he said. "I said it because I meant it. If claiming you means you're safe, then I'll do it again and again." Her eyes softened, but her voice still held weight. "You understand what that means, don't you? What people will think, what it makes me." He smiled softly. "Mine." Soraya felt her knees weaken just a little. She turned away, pretending to check the oven, but her heart was thundering louder than any ship engine. The town, however, did not remain silent. Word spread quickly. First whispers, then rumors. "The alien woman is married to Thomas now. Did you hear? She's not just living there. He claimed her. He's lost his mind, or he's in love." Some were angry, some curious, but most just confused. One afternoon, 2 councilmen from the colony came to the farm. Thomas met them at the gate, Soraya watching from the porch. "Thomas," the older man said, "this arrangement, it's unusual." Thomas didn't flinch, but not illegal. The second man looked toward the house. "She's an alien widow, fugitive by her people's law." "But not by ours," Thomas said. "She's a resident now." "She's my wife." Soraya stepped down from the porch, her chin high. "If I must face judgment, I'll face it with him," she said clearly. The older councilman raised an eyebrow. "You speak well for someone they call disposable," Soraya replied. "My people threw me away. This man gave me dignity. Which one of you is more human?" The men left quietly. Neither returned. Days passed, then weeks. Soraya stayed. Stronger, calmer, different. She wore simple earth clothes now, her alien armor buried beneath the barn floor. Every morning she helped Thomas with the fields. Every evening they sat on the porch sharing tea and stories, their hands often brushed by accident. But neither pulled away anymore. One evening, as stars blinked over the quiet sky, Soraya broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder if we were meant to meet?" Thomas thought for a moment. "I think you were hungry, and I had food. That's how most good things start," she smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes now. "On my world, marriage is sealed by a bond, a promise spoken under the sky." Thomas raised a brow. "What kind of promise?" She stood slowly and stepped into the moonlight, her eyes glowing softly. She looked at him and spoke. "I vowed to never run again, and to stand beside the one who saw me when no one else did." Thomas stood too, walking until he faced her. "I vowed to protect what others threw away, and to keep seeing the soul behind the scars." They stood in silence, not needing any more words. 2 lives from 2 different stars, now tied together not by law, but by choice, by kindness, by quiet, patient love. But far above the clouds, in the cold black of space, a message traveled. Through the stars, claim invalid, Earth law interfering with judgment, prepare for extraction. Someone wasn't finished with Zuriah, and this time, they weren't coming to speak. Rain tapped gently on the windows that morning, but inside Thomas's farmhouse the kitchen was filled with warmth. The oven crackled, a soft golden smell rising from fresh bread. Zuriah stood barefoot on the wooden floor, humming to herself. As she stirred a bowl of herbs, her long hair, now clean and braided, danced on her back like ribbons. Thomas sat at the table watching her with quiet eyes. Not long ago, that same woman had snuck into this very kitchen, starving and afraid. Now she moved like she belonged. Because she did. This wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was a home. I still don't understand how earth tea can smell like flowers and dirt at the same time. Zuriah teased. Thomas grinned. That's the secret. It's both. She laughed. A full, free laugh that filled the room and made the lights feel brighter. She set the tea down beside him and placed her hand over his without a word. They didn't need to say much anymore. Every glance said enough. Every quiet smile meant more than 1,000 promises. Outside, the wind picked up. A storm was rolling in, but not from Earth. Far above, hidden behind thick clouds, an unmarked alien ship hovered silently. It had no beacon, no markings, no warnings, just a single order pulsing through its comms. Retrieve the fugitive by force if necessary. Zuriah's smile faded as she stepped out to check on the chickens. Something felt wrong. The air had shifted. It smelled of ozone and something metallic. She froze when she heard it. A low, distant hum. Thomas came out seconds later holding a pair of binoculars from the tree line. A thin shadow moved unnaturally, gliding just above the ground. Zuriah's heart dropped. They're back, and this time, not to talk. Thomas ran into the house and pressed the emergency beacon. It sent a signal to the colony council and the nearest defense post, but Zuriah shook her head. They won't wait for anyone. They'll come fast. We'll be ready, he replied, opening a hidden chest under the floorboards. Inside, an old but functional laser rifle, an EMP device, and 2 shock grenades. Zuriah grabbed the EMP. If we take down their armor systems, they'll be vulnerable. Thomas nodded. You've done this before. She gave a sad smile. I used to be one of them. Before I was useless. The attack was sudden. 3 armored figures broke through the northern crop line. Fast, ruthless, and silent. One headed for the shed, one toward the power box, and the last, straight for the house. Thomas aimed, carefully, and fired. One shot cracked the shield of the lead enforcer. Zuriah activated the EMP and threw it hard toward the approaching figure. The device sparked and exploded midair. One suit flickered, then powered down. The enforcer inside dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Another tackled Thomas, slamming him to the wall. Zuriah screamed and leapt at the soldier with a shovel. She struck the visor, then the back of the head again and again until he collapsed. Blood ran from Thomas's lip, but he stood. You okay? She asked, panting. He nodded. Just a bruise, you? She wiped dirt from her face, alive. The last enforcer was already retreating, dragging one of his fallen teammates back toward the forest. Their mission had failed, and now they knew. This woman was no longer a weak target. She was protected, and worse, loved. Later that night, the councilmen arrived at the farm. They inspected the wreckage, asked questions, took notes. Zuriah sat quietly on the porch while Thomas spoke. When one of them approached her, she stood tall. I am not a threat, she said calmly. But I will not be taken again. The man nodded with respect. No one here will let that happen. Days passed. Then weeks. No more ships came. No more soldiers, just sunlight, soft winds, and the smell of baking bread. In the kitchen, Zuriah added something new to the shelf. A small drawing done by a child from the village. It showed a human man, a blue-skinned woman, and a house with a smiling sun. The child had written in wobbly letters, "Thank you for feeding her." Zuriah touched the drawing and closed her eyes. I never told you, she whispered one night lying beside Thomas. I dreamed once of a kitchen. Warm. Safe. I was never hungry in that dream. Thomas smiled and pulled her close. Then, let's never wake up, and so the woman once hunted, the widow once broken, became something else, a wife, a farmer, a protector, and above all, home.